Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Homage to the Blessed One, the Worthy One, the Supremely Enlightened One. And my homage to our teacher, Pingwat Lokaswami Nuhanse. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Dear meritorious devotees, now we have a schedule in our lives, right? Now what do? We get up early in the morning, we have a cup of tea, we cook, then we make a parcel, pack things up, and we get on the bus. If we meet a friend, we start a chat and speak about all the things in the world. And when we get into the workstation, again we mingle along, we spend our time talking. Sometimes people forget why they're there. They forget their work. They keep on talking. And when by the time comes to leave the office, what we do is that we pack our bags and we get on the bus again. When on our way home, we go on a little bit of shopping. We buy some stuff from these shops. We go home, and at times we cook. At times there's a fight. We cook, we eat, we watch TV, and we go to sleep. So this is what we do. This is our schedule. Every day, same thing is repeated. Early in the morning, we get up, we have a cup of tea, we go, we cook, then we go to work. We chat with people, endless talk. Then we waste our time over there. We get on the bus or a vehicle. We come back home, we go on shopping, we cook again, we sit in front of the TV and we watch for hours. We waste that time as well. And we go back to sleep. So it is repeated again and again. It's kind of monotonous. But the Buddha's schedule was not something like that. It was different and it was unique. He got up early in the morning at 2 o'clock. He washed himself up. Most probably he might have had some water to drink. And he sits and he abides himself in Mahakaruna Samapatti Jnana. Mahakaruna Samapatti Jnana means the great compassion, the knowledge of great compassion. In this concentration, what he does is that he looks at the entire world and he searches for the person who is meritorious enough to understand Dhamma on that particular day. So he sees him, and what he does is that then after that, once he sees this person, He gets up, he takes his extra robes and the bowl. He doesn't bother to cook. What he does is that he go on his alms round. If someone gets a chance to offer something to the Buddha, it becomes of great benefit to him because it is so meritorious. So that's why the Buddha does that. He walks slowly to house from one place to the other, from one house to the other house. He moves slowly on his alms round. So when he has had enough of his alms round, that means when he has sufficient amount to eat, he goes into a quiet place, a secluded place. He sits down and he has his meal. And after he has had his meal, if someone comes to meet him, he preaches Dhamma to that person. So, in the morning, he looked at the world and he selected a person to preach the Dhamma because he is the most meritorious person on that day. Then he decides to go in search for that person. And he meets him, or it can be a set of people. He meets them and he preaches Dhamma to these people. So now the Buddha had his meals in the morning hours. He didn't have any meal after 12 o'clock. So after 12 o'clock, what he does is that he lies down quietly and gets up later. That is for a short time. And he sits and he goes into a concentration. He meditates. And in the evening, he bathes himself. And in the evening, he goes to the assembly hall or the Dhamma hall to preach the bhikkhus some Dhamma. When the bhikkhus hear his preaches, they learn them by heart and they correct themselves according to that Dhamma. So he had a life, you can call, he had a life of Arahang. Arahang means a life that has no defilements. So he passed down his behavior to his disciples as well. Now, even the bhikkhus, they got up early in the morning, not exactly at 2, but early in the morning they got up and they meditated. They went on their alms rounds. They were of benefit to others on the alms round. They preached Dhamma to people who they met, and they discussed Dhamma, they preached Dhamma. So they were living in the Buddha's Dhamma. Now, by the time when it's 10 o'clock at night, from 10 to 12 midnight, there comes divine beings from all divine worlds and Brahma worlds, and they ask questions from the Buddha. The Buddha teaches them the Dhamma. Now, what is this time period? It is from 10 p.m. to 12 midnight. So that is the time the Buddha has allocated, spared for divine beings. So when the Buddha preaches Dhamma during that period, divine beings and the Brahmas who hear this Dhamma, they understand the Dhamma and they become enlightened. So it is clear from this incident, this story, that his leadership is not there for human beings only. It is there for divine beings as well. Now, from 12 midnight to 2 in the morning, he has a small sleep. He had no pillows. Now we have pillows, but the Buddha had no pillows. What he did was that he just laid his head on his palm, his hand, and he slept for 4 hours. Slept for 2 hours, from 12 to 2 in the morning. So he led this life for how long? He became enlightened at the age of 35, and his final passing away was at the age of 80. So that means for 45 years he practiced this schedule. So it is clear from these points that he has led a life that is beautiful. So that is why we call him Sugata. That is why we call him Sugata, since it was a beautiful life that he spent, a beautiful schedule he had. Now, human beings in their long journey of Samsara, when they come into this human world, they live different. It's not the same time all the time. They are born differently all the time. Sometimes these people, human beings, they are born as animals. We don't get the chance. We don't get the chance to come here every day, every time. Sometimes people are born in hell. Sometimes people are born in the ghost world. At times they're born as asuras, and the animal world is there. Rarely we see the human world. Now there was such an incident in Savatthi, the city of Savatthi. There was a set of people, 500 of them, fishermen. They caught a beautiful fish, it was golden in color. Now, because of this uniqueness of this fish, what they did was that they put that fish into a tank, and they carried that tank to the castle where the king was, and they showed that fish to the king. The king became delighted. He said, "This fish, I think we should go and show this fish to the Buddha." The reason is just because he's so beautiful. Now, for these men, 500 fishermen, the king is an important person. But for the king, the Buddha is an important person. So that's why the king decided to show it to the Buddha. So as soon as the moment they entered the monastery, the fish opened up his mouth, he burped, and the air became so unpleasant. It was so unpleasant to breathe. People started coughing. It was smelly everywhere. Now, people were puzzled. The body is in golden color. The body is so beautiful. But the mouth, it stinks. So everyone wanted to know the reason behind this. Then they kept this fish in front of the Buddha, and the Buddha looked at the fish and understood who that fish was, and looked at the assembly and addressed the assembly saying, "Do you want to know who this fish is?" And everyone said yes. So Buddha, using his psychic powers, he made the fish talk. The Buddha asked the fish, "Dear fish, where were you before?" The fish replied saying, "I was in the human world." Then the Buddha asked, "What did you do in the human world?" "I was a monk," he said. The fish said that when he was in the human world, once he was in the human world, that he was a monk. And the Buddha asks, "What was your name back then?" Then the fish replied, "Kapila. My name was Kapila." "Oh, he said so. Your name was Kapila." Then the Buddha asked, "Who else was there in your family?" Then the fish says, "My mother was there. Her name is Sadhana. Tapana is my sister's name. I had a brother named Sodana. All of us were monks or nuns. All of us were ordained," the fish said. Then the Buddha asked, "Where are they now?" "My mom and my sister, both of them are in hell," it said. Then the Buddha asked, "Why? What is the reason?" "Oh, Bhante, we did a lot of demerits. Back then when we were living as human beings and as monks and nuns, There were virtuous monks, and we were jealous to them. And what we did was that we got together and we condemned them. We scolded them. Even though we were monks by body, we had robes. By heart, we were not acting so. So after death, I was born in this animal realm, the fish said. So what happened? The Buddha asks now. So what happened to you? Tell me, what happened to your brother? Where is he now? Oh, my brother, it was not just the body that he ordained his mind as well. He became enlightened. Then the Buddha asks, now what happens to you, fish? The fish says, after this life I'm living as a fish. I will end up in hell again, he said. Then after saying that, it popped up its head and hit it on the edge of the tank, and it died, and it was born in hell. So the story behind a fish, is it possible for us to see the story behind a fish? Certainly it is not possible for us to see stories behind other people. We see people, we see human beings, we see men and women. But it is not possible for us to see their past lives, why they're here, why they're experiencing so much pain or pleasure. So it is not possible for us to see. But for a Buddha, it is possible to see. And it doesn't take that much of time. See, in this incident, he looked at the fish and he knew. In a split of a second, he knew the story. He just had a conversation with the fish because then it would become much more interesting to the people who were gathered there, to the assembly, to the king and the fishermen. Now what happened was that at the end of the story, these 500 fishermen, they became so afraid of fishing, since fishing is a bad sin. They stopped it, and all 500, they became ordained. They were ordained. They became monks, and all 500, they were enlightened. So, stories of not just human beings, but all living beings, the Buddha knew. Now, that's why we called him Lokavidu. We called him Lokavidu because not only about this world, but he knows about everything, all the worlds. Now, the Buddha is called Lokavidu because he knows about the human world. He knows about the four bad destinations. He knows everything about all divine beings, be it the six divine states or all the Brahma worlds. Now, sometimes it is unfortunate to see in this community, this Buddhist community, we have people who say that all these worlds are here, present here in this human world. They point at people who are wealthy and they say, look at that person, that is the divine world. when he's enjoying all the sensual pleasures, when he has so much money, spending money lavishly, and when people look at that kind of a person, they say, "Look at that is heaven," but that is not true. Then when they see poor people, beggars, begging for money, food, and uh, clothes, they go on and say, "Look at that poor person. He's he's that is what's called hell." So this is really, we should not uh, say so, because it is clear from the Dhamma, we know from the Buddha's Dhamma, that there are separate worlds. There is something called the hell, the ghost world, the animal world, and Brahma worlds, and all the divine worlds are there. And by the merit we have gained here today, we wish you would attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana in this Gautama Buddha's dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.